after the signal leaves the cochlea, the first place it goes is to the cochlear nucleus. And that's just kind of a crude little thing. It analyzes lows, mids, and high frequencies, and it's responsible for recognizing when a sound has turned on and when it's turned off. It's not a smart processor. Then it goes up the chain, and the next stop is the superior olivary complex. That's comparing what you hear at your left and right ears. Inside there are coincidence detectors that are they're doing the computation to determine where in the horizontal plane a sound source came from. So it's a little bit smarter than the cochlear nucleus. Then it goes to our first smart processing stage, which is the inferior colliculus. This guy's got an important job to do. So the arrows show the signal going up, but it's actually a bidirectional path. So our audio is coming up from the cochlea and it's coming down from the brain, because your brain is telling your ears what to listen for. Just like our eyes move around a visual field and decide what we want to hone in on, our ears move around an auditory field and decide what we want to listen to. That inferior colliculus is getting top-down information, bottom-up information. That thing is really busy because it's having to filter what we're listening to and what signals are getting boosted and what are getting cut based on what you want to be paying attention to. Then from there, the signal keeps going up the chain, and here's a cool part. It goes to the medial geniculate nucleus of the thalamus. Now here's why we say that sound is a special form of touch. That region of the brain is in the thalamus, which processes emotions, which means we feel sound before we even think about it. This is what gives us the startle reflex. This is why low frequency rumbles signal danger. We have ancient circuits in our lizard brain, way down deep, that are responding to sound before we've even thought about it. In your mixing, you can be effective at manipulating certain signals, especially the ones that signal danger, like low frequency information, to get your listener to pay attention. Then from there, the signal arrives at its destination, which is just above your ears, the superior temporal lobe. That's your primary auditory cortex. The cool thing about it, this whole path of our neural wiring is arranged tonotopically, like the keys on a piano. So of those 30,000 nerves, just like with a cable, piece of copper cable, it exhibits skin effect. The high frequencies travel on the outside of the nerve bundle. Mid frequencies, kind of midway through. Low frequencies go through the whole bundle, just like with audio, with our wiring. If you're going to hook up your loudspeakers, you want a thick 4-gauge cable because of skin effect, because the high frequencies are only traveling on the surface of the bundle. If you've got a nice thick bundle, you've got more surface area for your high frequencies. Turns out our auditory neural bundle does the exact same thing. High frequencies are vulnerable and they're weak. So our auditory system is tonotopically arranged, and when they reach their destination here, right above your ears, it's laid out. Down toward the middle part of your brain, where your highest high frequencies reach their destination, your low frequencies right here near the edge of the brain. Now if you'll look at this tonotopic organization is how we can use notch noise therapy to help with tinnitus. So imagine you got tinnitus and you got a ringing in your ears at 3 kilohertz, right there, at 3 kilohertz, and it's bad. And tinnitus is caused in many places in the audio path, but it's up here that hears it. You hear that ringing in your ears. Notch noise therapy delivers a signal for you. If you've got 3K as your tinnitus frequency, it'll deliver a signal at 2.8K. Maybe it'll have you listen to a signal at 3.2K for half an hour a day, twice a day, to train this path to learn that 2.8K is important, 3K isn't. So your brain is going to devote more neural processing to 2.8K. Anything you do a lot, you get good at. Anything you listen to a lot, the brain says, all right, I guess this guy really likes this. I'm going to devote more neural resources to it, and that will diminish and alleviate your tinnitus a little bit because you've taught it, no, don't pay attention to that 3K, it's that 2.9K or whatever it is that matters. We're gonna lose hearing acuity as we get older, and you can't avoid that. Careful of interpreting this. This was collected in Europe, over 3,000 males from Europe and, there were two studies, Europe and China, but this is just Europe. European males only. And Gerald Fleischer, the great, was looking at just the normal aging lines. And you see frequencies here, up to 10K, and you see loss there. The area in orange is considered normal hearing. Now, if you plot the average, turns out by the time you're 40 years old, you should still be in that average zone for 10K. But by the time you're 50 or 60 or 70, as you see, we have high frequency hearing loss. But it's important to recognize there's great variability in this data. I could tell you for sure, I'm almost 70 years old. I hear 8K. Not as well as I used to, but I hear 8K. I don't have to boost the high frequencies. As I'll show you in a few slides, musical training enhances your auditory path. I don't have musical training per se, but I've spent a lifetime making records. So those of us who work in sound, Fleischer's work showed this, actually have enhanced auditory capabilities in our auditory path, which helps protect us from inevitable loss. So this is the average loss, but doesn't mean it's going to apply to you. This is the greatest thing ever, and I wish I had a lot of time and a nice quiet environment to show you how this works, because it is tremendously awesome. But basically, in our cochlea right now, we've got our A to D converters and we've got our D to A converters, because that's what has to happen. Remember I said pressure variations must become transduced into an information pattern. That information pattern is essentially ones and zeros. The one, nerve spike, zero, the absence of a spike. It is the row of inner hair cells that does that job. They're sitting there with their little hairs up top, and when that basilar membrane's going up and down, little hairs are swaying back and forth. Little pores in the hairs are opening and closing. Neurotransmitters are coming in, and they're being cut off. And they're coming in, and they're being cut off, depending on the phase of the basilar membrane going up and down. So that mechanical motion is transduced into bam, 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 a pattern of nerve spikes. If you're listening to a 1 kilohertz sine wave, it's happening 1,000 times a second. It works great. Up to about 4.5K, and then the poor little things, they can't go fast enough. 88 key piano, the highest note on a piano, it's around 4.4K. There's a reason for that, because beyond 4.4K, we lose phase locking and we don't have pitch perception. That's why the highest note on an 88 key piano has a tone, has a high pitched tone. It doesn't have a pitch. It sounds like a dink, 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 because your poor little hair cells can only do so much. There's your analog to digital conversion right there. Then, and here's the even better part, these little guys, outer hair cells, are responding to your command to hone in on what you want to listen to. So you're mixing, and you want to hear the tenor sax, and right now you're not interested in the drums and the bass and the keyboards and the vocals. You want that tenor sax. Attentional commands will be thinking tenor sax, tenor sax. You're sending a signal down the same auditory path. Your inferior colliculus is saying, okay. It's sending commands to these guys, to the outer hair cells, and it's telling them tenor sax, tenor sax. And what those little things are doing, they're getting a neural command coming down from above to boost activity in some frequency bands and suppress it in others. Their little bodies touch that tectorial membrane up above. They have a property that no other cell in all of nature is known to have. It's called electromotility. When it gets a nerve command, fluid enters and leaves its little body. Imagine a water balloon that's partially filled with water. You tied it off. You squeeze that water balloon, you can expand it, you can compress it. They're like that. And they push and pull at your command on this tectorial membrane to add energy to the frequencies that correspond to that tenor sax. So it turns out, we see on the x-axis that's Mousie's age in weeks, and on the y-axis we see percent survival. The white triangles, diamonds, are the outer hair cells that we just saw. The gray circles are the inner hair cells, and the black are the auditory nerves, the spiral ganglion cells. Turns out when we hit middle age, 45, that's when you got to hold the menu further out. The focus, curvature of your lens starts to change. 45 is when it all starts to go downhill for your eyes and for your ears too. And that's when our outer hair cells start to die off. This is showing what happens to poor Mousie with excessive noise exposure at 5.6K, which corresponds to about 1K for us. What's going to happen is, with and without noise exposure, our outer hair cells are gonna die off. When they die off, you've lost your compressor expanders. Not totally, but some of them. You don't hear speech and noise as well. You don't hear speech and reverb as well. I've started to notice at my age, I'm 68 now, it's almost funny. I'm having a harder time with spatial localization. Something will fall in the house, it'll be over there, and I'll be over here. Spatial localization, I know you're noticing that, right? So spatial localization, speech and noise, speech and reverb gets a little harder as you get older. It's going to happen naturally. As I said earlier, if you work in pro audio, and especially if you have musical training, you got a little bit of a bonus going on there. You've got a super highway, and you have greater acuity to begin with, which can protect you from some of these losses. Here's kind of what it would be like, and if you can see it, if you can visualize it, it helps you understand it. This is comparing the encoding of a signal with 10 nerve fibers, and if you only had 3 nerve fibers. If you've killed off some audio nerves due to age, due to excessive noise exposure. So let's imagine that this is a 2 kilohertz sine wave, that's the carrier wave, and then the modulator is, let's have it be 400 or 500 hertz. Let's let it be 500 hertz. So 500 hertz modulator, and that's the temporal envelope, and then the fine structure is 2K. If you've got 10 nerve fibers, you can encode that. You can encode the temporal envelope. You got enough nerve spike activity across those 10 nerves that you got peaks for that modulator wave, and you've got enough peaks for the fine structure for the 2 kilohertz. You're good, you're good. You got good resolution. You can decode that and hear both fine structure and temporal envelope. If you've killed off audio nerves and you've only got 3 left, that's the best you can do. You can kind of encode that low frequency wave, but look at the signal to noise ratio. Not nearly as good. You've got some representation of the carrier wave, the higher fine structure, but this is showing us how our signal to noise ratio for our internal audio processor gets worse and worse, especially if we've killed off auditory nerves.